Hello, everybody. Welcome to There Are No Accidents, Unpacking the Underlying Crimes in Crime Fiction with F.H. Batacan. Yes, so let's begin with our opening lines. To truly understand a country or a city, you must read its crime fiction. Think about the city you live in and what kinds of crimes often take place there. Are they tied to a broader system, structure, or mindset that allows such crimes to happen? Write about a crime and the larger crime behind it. Thank y'all for sharing. I'm super excited for you guys to be here and to hear from our author of the night, F.H. Batagan. So, F.H. Batagan is a Filipino crime fiction writer. She worked in the Philippine intelligence community for a decade and then switched careers to journalism. She won the Philippines National Book Award in 2002 for her first novel, Smaller and Smaller Circles. It was published by New York Soho Press in 2015 in an expanded version. 2 years later, it was adapted into a feature film. In 2024, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award for fiction in English by the Writers Union of the Philippines. Her collection of short stories, Accidents Happen, was released by Soho Press in March. Anyway, passing it off to F.H. Batagan.
Thank you, Tara. I'm really very honored to be here with you today to talk about writing and specifically writing crime fiction, something which is very close to my heart. Accidents Happen contains a series of short stories written over the span of 30 odd years, some of which have been previously published and anthologized, and some of which are relatively new. I'll preface anything I say here with the admission that this is my view. I feel like I myself am still learning after all these years to write crime fiction. I don't consider myself an expert, and when I come to events and situations like this, I bring only my own life and writing experience and reading experience, which I hope can be of some use to you. So many years ago, I started working in the Philippine intelligence community. It was an agency that was very much involved in the investigation of economic crimes. I received firsthand exposure to systems of corruption and rent seeking. Now, without going into too much detail, for example, I was working on a project that would have improved the way we investigated, the way we collected and analyzed data on the types of crimes that we were working on. A lot of it was economic sabotage. But because many officials at levels above me and my department were actually benefiting from leaving existing inefficiencies and corruption untouched, we were stymied at every turn. I started writing my first novel during a period of extreme frustration and unhappiness. That period in my life, I would say, cemented my view that corruption and rent seeking and the glaring incompetence of those in power are some of the most heinous crimes because they impact not just one person. You can stab a person and impact just one person, but in these kinds of crimes that impact many and in extremely onerous ways. And this is sometimes they call it the victimless crime because they impact so many, and many people don't even realize that they're victims. No. So I have a fondness for a particular type of crime fiction that is rooted in place and time and almost always in the society that the writer lives in. My interest as a writer has always been how we approach the investigation and resolution of crime in the context of broader social and cultural mindsets. As a writer from a developing country like the Philippines, I've come to realize that, all the tropes of Western crime fiction don't necessarily apply to our society. The brilliant detective, the clever plot twist, the red herrings, and Most importantly, the neatly wrapped up, sort of tidy resolutions don't work in a society like ours. In the Philippines, crimes are often pretty straightforward, but it's the pursuit and the attainment of justice that is difficult. No? I've sometimes seen young Filipino writers. They watch American shows like CSI, and they write sort of with all of the bells and whistles of advanced forensics and so on. But the reality in most parts of my country is that we don't have access to such technologies, and even if we did have a little bit of that, some of the many of our law enforcement units have only the most basic tools at their disposal, and even those tools may not be employed to their best advantage. No, I have come to think of my work as a kind of decolonization of Philippine crime fiction, and a recognition that within crime fiction there's a multitude of worlds and experiences and realities. So what may work, say, in Nordic crime fiction or in American crime fiction doesn't work for us. No? Often in our criminal and law enforcement history, there are much larger forces at play than just the crime that we see on the surface. And I think that is characteristic of a lot of contemporary crime fiction. You also see it in a lot of Asian crime fiction. And to me, the challenge is, even as you try to create a human story on a human scale with human passions or perversions, the hope is still to lay bare the machine that grinds on in the background, the systems that set characters up for hatred or failure or desperation or death. So I talked earlier about how conventional plot twists don't always work for Philippine crime fiction. Instead, I employ what I personally call the shift. No, so my stories don't often have conventionally tidy resolutions. A lot of the crime fiction I have been reading over the past decade or so actually has very few of those. So I think that also reflects the kind of world we live in. The complications, the moral and legal compromises, the failure of entire institutions and agencies, and the collective failure of societies. We were talking earlier about policing, and in the Philippines, policing is very much when you meet a policeman in the middle of the night, you're driving and you're stopped. It's terrifying. There's very little trust in local law enforcement because they have been involved in our last president's drug war. They have been involved in corruption. So the last thing, when you're driving down a street or a road in the middle of the night and you run into some trouble, I think you are more likely to be afraid when a policeman comes by than when, like, an ordinary citizen like stops by to try and help you. No, sometimes you get to the end of a book or a story and nothing has changed, or maybe only the central character has changed. Maybe he or she is damaged or disillusioned somehow, but still chooses to battle on. So what I call the shift is the moment in the story when either the reader or the central character or both finally clearly sees the machine. And by the machine, I mean these are the systems and the mindsets and the laws and the structures that oppress and that keep the people in power detached from the people they are supposed to serve. And that's also why I think crime fiction is so important in a country like ours and in the world that we live in now. No, so I write often characters who have, in my mind, they have very clear backstories. And these are the building blocks of my characters. They actually determine how these characters will act in given situations. I always say, in accidents happen, there are no accidents. Every major act that happens has been decided and deliberated and premeditated. I always go back to the question a friend asked me a long time ago. She said, now, Ichi, when you make a decision, do you take a longer time deciding on a big decision or a small decision? So by big decisions, he talks about life-changing decisions like, should I accept a bribe? Should I act in a way that compromises my professional integrity? Or the small decisions like, what am I going to have for breakfast? Or what am I going to wear to the girls right now salon? So so I said, obviously you take a longer time to decide the big important things. And he said, no, actually, if you think about it, you take a much shorter time with the big decisions. And I asked, how come? It's because the big decisions reflect who you are. No, so if you're a young man and you're at a party and there's a girl that you fancy, she is drunk and has passed out, you are either the kind of young man who will take advantage of that and assault the girl while she's drunk, or you are not. You are either the kind of public official that will take a bribe or you are not. The decision is fast, no? So this is what I mean by all of the characters in my stories. When they act, this is who they are. When I write, I think a lot about evil, human evil, systemic evil. It's become so commonplace and so mundane that we all have become accustomed to it, whether it's hunger or financial need or poverty or corruption, the destruction of our natural environment, to the everyday violences that we all suffer. I think Tara mentioned, people hopping the turnstiles. Obviously there's some underlying reason for that, no? We can no longer recognize that evil, even when it is happening right in front of us, and especially so when we are participating in it. No? So I want my stories to have what I call the curse of the familiar. I refer to it as, I want my stories to spark a moment of recognition that, yes, I think I know a person who's like this, or I think I know a person in power or a politician who's like this, or I think I recognize a situation like this, or I've been in a situation like this. So I guess I hope that my readers come away from my stories with a heightened sense of human evil and of systemic evil, something that makes them pause in the middle of it all and say, I see this evil, or I recognize this situation, or this set of circumstances, or this policy, or this situation as evil. And I feel like the more we recognize evil, the more we're aware of the myriad forms that it can take, the less power it has over us. And in that, there is hope. Okay, so I think we will move on to some of the writing prompts. One of the overarching themes of the book is the idea that there are no accidents and that every human act of either evil or good is deliberate and logical. So think about a crime fiction story in which a character acts with deliberation and intent for either good or evil. Why does he or she act this way? And is it because of circumstance, or is it rooted in his or her character? Okay, thank you. Thanks for all the responses. The second prompt is, consider a character who witnesses a crime but chooses not to report it. What motivates their silence? Is it fear, complicity, exhaustion, or self-preservation? What does their inaction reveal about the world they live in and the systems that may have taught them that speaking up won't make a difference? Write a scene from their point of view that reveals both the external crime and the internal conflict.
So her Instagram ad is right there, her handle, as well as her email.
Thank you to our amazing guest author. Thank you to Tara for facilitating so wonderfully. And thank you to you all, not just for being here, but for giving our author your participation, your insight, your questions. We truly, truly appreciate it. And we wish you a great rest of your evening. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.